Hello guys. So I'm going to continue on with the programming of certain sites. So I brought up the file I had before when we were talking about HTML. So remember that HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. And what we're dealing with today is a little bit more of the structure element rather than the actual just this formatting per se. All right, so what we have here is basically what I kind of left off with. We got headings. Headings go from 1 to 6. We also have paragraphs that have strong and M, which stands for emphasis, and it gives the italicized version of that particular word. All right, so what I'm going to start with here is basically showing you how to develop, or how sites used to be actually laid out. We used to actually, before websites were even brought up, the internet was actually used as an information tool for scientists. So the internet, when it came about, actually was just this portal to send documents from one place to another. It was not really used as the way we have it now. It was only used for scientific purposes, and it was only allowed to send like scientific data from one place to another. So what we have here is they used to send things in what we call data tables, and tables were used to kind of like create data that was laid out in a certain way. Well, somebody actually brought up the great idea of actually using those tables to lay out pages. So we would develop a table and then put stuff in it. And that's how we actually developed websites for a long time, actually, until they came out with what stands for CSS, which stands for Cascading Style Sheets. But we're going to kind of like concentrate on tables right now, and what we're dealing with here is we deal with two tags. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start here, and basically it's going to put up both of them here on the up here on the side top. All right, so first off, we have to have what is called a table, which is how it pronounces table, and then it has an end tag of a table, which basically means anything in between that is going to be what's called a table where you can put data. And in each one, you have to develop what is called a row, and that's abbreviated by TR. All right, so we're going to put a tag TR, which ends with a TR. Now, each table has a row. Even the very first or raw version of a table also has to have a row, but it also has to have a column. And what it refers to is like each row has a certain amount of columns in it. So that's what the TR stands for, is it refers to the actual row. We're dealing with columns. So in each row you have to have a certain amount of columns, and each column is represented by a certain tag of TD. So if I have here, if I have TR, and then it says TD, TD, and then TR is wrapping around the TD. So that's one column is really what it is. So I can put in here, let's say apples. And if I go up here, you'll see that right now there's a dotted line, which actually represents that table. So if I wanted to have another column, I can wrap another one right after the end tag of the TD, because that TD is referring to that one particular column, or what we also refer to as that cell. That cell is in one column in one row. So I'm going to start with TD. I'm going to put this one, and I'm going to put oranges. So if I go back up here, you'll see that dotted line refers to round oranges now. Now if I go and put another one, TD, grapes. That refers to here is that there's another one called grapes in here. So if I go apples, oranges, grapes, they're all surrounded by these dotted lines that are referred to as table cells. All right. So let's say I want to go ahead and I want to add in another row. You'd simply start from the end tag of a row. I usually hit return just to go ahead and make sure I'm in that row. And then I use TD. And then I maybe put some data in there like 5 Granny Smiths. All right. The important thing to refer to is basically what you have to refer to is if you put in 3 cells in a row, that refers to 3 columns. If you create a new row, you have to put in 3 cells to match that up. All right, there's another way of actually what we call spanning, which I'm not going to talk about today. All right, so I'm going to put in TD and I'm going to put 2 navel. And then at the end of that TD, I'm going to put in another one. Grapes. 6 Concord. If I go back up here, you'll see that here, apples, 5 Granny Smiths, oranges, 2 navel, and grapes, 6 Concord. So those are referred to as the tables. So tables are always wrapped within a beginning table tag and an end table tag. But inside of that, you got TR referring to the row, and then TD referring to the column or cell of that row. So you got those. Okay. All right. So after, like, basically you're not going to really teach you what we used to do is we used to actually give tables a characteristic, kind of like its color or border or whatever thickness. We don't do that anymore because what it's doing is it's basically we set that up via what we call cascading style sheets. So I'm not really going to show you that right now, but I wanted to show you that particular structure. Now, when we're dealing with websites, we also deal with a few other things. There used to be what we called, like, when we dealt with layout websites with tables, that's how we dealt with, or actually incorporating designs within tables. Now, or after tables were done, when they started introducing cascading style sheets, we used to use a tag called div, which referred to as divider. All right, div tags referred to as like divider tags. All right, so if I go in here and you notice that there's not really anything here. All right, if I were to put in that div something here, all right, you'll notice that there's a dotted line that spans the whole width across, because dividers are referring to is basically referring to the whole width of that particular page. All right, so we used to actually put dividers and label them as certain things. Not going to show you this yet, but in CSS we refer to as IDs. Basically, we would define that in a header to being a header in an ID of header. That's how we used to do that. All right, so you go up here, it didn't change anything, but when we deal with cascading style sheets, we have to reference in the style sheet that particular header. So I know if I'm going to tell that header to be blue or have a border of 3, I can tell it in the cascading style sheets to look at that and give it some characteristic. But now we are in a new age. New age dealing with what we call HTML5. HTML5 introduced some new tags. I'm going to go through those with you right now. All right. One, if we had a div, we would used to call it an ID of header. Now there is actually a tag called header, which referred to basically the head portion of it. Not what we refer to as the head, which we have here. This is called a header, kind of like a masthead to a particular website. So like when you guys are designing your projects, you may have things like the logo or the navigation or the contact information up in the header. That's what we refer to as that. Another one that we deal with is what we call nav. All right. Nav refers to a tag that where the navigation is. So kind of like the navigation that goes across, that's where we would drop our information at. Another one is called, well, you can call main. There's a tag called main in here, which maybe refers to the main content, but I don't really ever really use it. Instead, what I like to do is when I'm designing a site, I like to actually put it in what's called a section. All right, sections refer to as one-off elements or sections within a particular site. There's also article. Article tags refer to as like if I'm dropping an article or a small bit of copy that become like the main content of the site, I may put in an article. All right, even though sidebars are going away, there is also another one called a side, which refers to a section on the side of a web page, like the sidebar. Okay, but again, I don't use that very much at all anymore. And then the last one is what we call a footer. Footer is where you would actually put in like bottom navigation or contact information or even the copyright line, disclaimer stuff. It would be at the very bottom of the page. So there is actually a footer tag in HTML. All right, so these are the main ones. Now, when we're dealing with CSS, just like up here when I did div equals header, I can do the same thing here. So it's like header ID, main header in here. Okay, now you notice some of my naming conventions, I don't include a space. That's very important when you're dealing with CSS, is to deal with not spaces. All right, so I have a main header here, but this is a header area. All right, so navigation could also be, ID main nav. Okay, most of the time, if you're having a nav tag, there's only really one navigation, so you can just basically give it that nav tag. Articles, however, and sections, we do deal with that, which would be space ID equals main section. All right. Whatever you want to name it, it's totally fine. So it's like I have these names here, but they're all made up. They're not set in stone for something. They don't do anything, but the tags do. So you can put different tags within there. We still use the div tag because that will help us to divide certain sections within those tags. That will help out greatly. All right. So another one that we deal with is what we call image tags. All right, so you want to put in an image in here, and I guess you go up here, and you'll notice there's nothing there because there's nothing in these tags. All right, so if I want to drop an image in there, all right, there is what's called an image tag. Image is IMG. All right, these are what are called these one-side tags. All right, each tag that I've showed you had a beginning and it had an end. There are certain tags that only have one element, and that is image. Image is one of those. Now, image stands for IMG. Then you have to do a space SRC, which basically refers to the source. Okay? So if I'm putting in source in here, I have to put an equal sign and beginning quotes. All right? And what we can do is I will basically refer to somewhere along here to see if there's anything on the desktop. Ah, nice one. I'm going to show my daughter here. All right. So if I go here, click this, open, it's going to drop in that JPEG. All right. Now, the important convention of this is that it basically is outside of your, basically outside of what you're doing. So here I have this. I want to save it, but I'm not done yet. All right. So image source equals that, and then basically you have to give it some characteristics like width equals, in quotes, you can give it a certain pixel size, whether it's like 200 pixels wide, or you can have it span by, let's say, 30%. Right? That gives it a 30% width of it. Okay. Another one you can do is height too. If you know a certain height, you can give it a certain height of 100 pixels. End quote. All right. And then you can end it. To end the tag, you have to put a slash symbol and then save it. If I go here, you'll notice here the image here is set up to be 30%, but the height is 100 pixels. So if I take out the pixel or height here and I bring it back, you'll notice it says back to its own width. But it's very important. This is where organization comes into play, because that particular JPEG has to be near the file. Typically what you have is a structure where it's like they're in an image folder. All your images get dropped into that, and that image folder is next to the file. So it's like if that was in an image folder, it would be images slash. All right, slash, and then that basically means that inside the images folder is this JPEG to work on. All right, guys, so I'm going to stop right there. I know this is a lot of information, but again, this deals with how sites are laid out in the background. All right, so the next video I'm going to cover some cascading style sheets and figure out how to actually style this to make it look better. All right, so I will talk to you guys later. Bye.